Most Americans have never tasted the fruit that saved whole tribes from starvation. And the strange part is, it might be growing less than 50 miles from your front porch. They call it pawpaw. Not some imported delicacy, not a store-bought hybrid. Just a plain, wild fruit that grows in 26 states across this country, more places than apples ever dared to grow naturally. Now the taste. Well, that's something else. Folks say it's like a banana married a mango. Smooth, tropical, sweet. Which explains why the old settlers nicknamed it the poor man's banana. Makes sense, doesn't it? But the native tribes, well, they didn't laugh at it. They respected it. They knew better than to ignore a treasure growing in their own woods. They'd mash ripe pawpaws into dense cakes, provisions that could outlast the dead of winter. When snow buried the land and game was scarce, those cakes meant survival. And survival was no small thing, because pawpaws weren't just filling. They were nutritional powerhouses, more vitamin C than apples, nearly as much potassium as bananas. Each bite was a life insurance policy carved out by Mother Nature herself. But here's the rub. The very strength of the pawpaw, that custard soft flesh, was also its curse. You so much as look at one the wrong way, and it bruises. Try to ship it to market, you'll wind up with a wagon full of mush. That's why you don't see pawpaws lined up neat in the grocery aisle. They weren't meant for commerce, they were meant for survival. And the strangest thing of all, the way they ripen. Green and hard as river stones one day. Then almost overnight, they turn to sweet custard. Wait too long, and you got nothing but brown sludge. Catch it just right, though, and you've got something finer than any tropical fruit flown in from overseas. Modern foragers are catching on to what the old tribes already knew. Pawpaw ice cream, legendary. Puddings, smoothies, pies. It all works. Some folks say it tastes like vanilla custard with a tropical twist. Pawpaw trees still dot forests from Georgia up through Michigan. They bloom in spring with deep purple flowers, a beauty tempered by a faint stink of rotting meat. Nature's sly trick to draw in flies for pollination. Beauty and stink in perfect harmony. Of course, the pawpaw wasn't the only wild fruit that kept families alive. In the northern wetlands, another berry was making its mark. A berry with a name that warned you right up front, chokeberry. Now, the first time you bite into one raw, you'll understand. Your mouth puckers so hard, it feels like somebody swapped your saliva for sandpaper. It's a shock, a punishment, a fruit that doesn't want to be eaten. But here's where native ingenuity came alive. They didn't toss chokeberries aside. They turned them into survival fuel. The tribes mixed them with dried meat and fat, pressing the mixture into dense little cakes called pemmican. It was the original energy bar. Portable, calorie-dense, capable of lasting months without spoiling. Warriors carried it on long journeys. Families relied on it through long winters. And the chokeberry secret? Those bitter tannins that made your tongue shrivel also packed the fruit with antioxidants, more than blueberries. We're talking medicinal power disguised as punishment. Nature's pharmacy hiding in a puckered mouthful. Cook them, though, and the story changes. A simmering pot of chokeberries transforms into something rich, almost wine-like. The tribes knew this long before anyone understood chemistry. They boiled them into sauces, dried them into fruit leather, blended them into other foods for a nutritional kick. They weren't just surviving. They were engineering their survival. Even now, chokeberries haven't quit. They still thrive in those northern bogs and wetlands across Canada and the United States. Hardy little things. Too much water? Too much cold? No problem. They're survivors, just like the people who once depended on them. Modern science has finally caught up to what the old tribes always knew. Chokeberry juice lowers blood pressure, fights inflammation, strengthens the body from the inside out. Health stores sell it today for high prices. Funny, isn't it? What once grew free by the gallon is now bottled and sold as a luxury. If chokeberries were the tough little survivors of the wetlands, then cloudberries were their cold-hearted cousins. And when I say cold, these golden orange jewels grow where most plants wouldn't dare set root. Up in the bogs of Alaska, northern Canada, and those frozen places where winter never truly loosens its grip. Where most fruit trees would wither and die, cloudberries thrive. Each plant gives you just one single berry. And that's right, not clusters, not handfuls, just one. And maybe that's why they shine like treasure when you find them. Because every berry feels like it was earned. Now bite into one, and you'll know why the northern tribes guarded them so fiercely. The flavor's like apricots kissed with citrus, sweet, but bright enough to wake you up on the darkest winter day. And more than that, they were medicine disguised as dessert. See, long before sailors carried limes to ward off scurvy, Arctic peoples were feasting on cloudberries. These little things pack enough vitamin C to keep you healthy through the long months when fresh food was nothing but a dream. Add fiber, antioxidants, and a compound called ellagic acid that strengthens the heart, and you start to see why cloudberries weren't just food. They were survival. Locals call them northern gold for a reason. And just like real gold, folks don't share their spots. Families pass down berry patches like heirlooms, keeping them secret from outsiders. After all, when your land produces something this rare, it's more than a food. It's a legacy. Now, if cloudberries were the rare treasures of the North, persimmons were the sweet surprise hiding in the woods and fields of the Midwest and South. These little orange globes didn't just feed people, they fooled them too. See, bite into a persimmon too early, and you'll think you made the worst mistake of your life. An unripe persimmon will pucker your mouth so hard you'll swear your tongue turned to sandpaper. Your saliva disappears, leaving you with a bitter, chalky mess that makes you question every life choice. But here's the secret the tribes knew: patience. Wait until those persimmons get soft. So soft they look like they're rotting, and magic happens. The flesh turns into silky custard, sweet as honey, smooth as caramel. That's when persimmons become what they were always meant to be: nature's candy. Native tribes weren't about to waste a gift like that. They dried the fruits, baked them into bread, turned them into puddings that could last through winter. They knew timing was everything. Harvest too early? You've got misery. Harvest at the right moment, and you've got food fit for a king. And nutritionally? Persimmons packed a punch. Beta-carotene for strong eyes, vitamin A and C for immune strength, and natural sugars that gave quick energy without the crash. In hard times, that made the difference between surviving the cold or falling to it. But don't expect to find wild persimmons in your grocery store. They're too delicate to ship. If you want them, you've got to know where to look or plant your own tree. Persimmons remind us of a truth our ancestors knew well. In nature, the best rewards often come to those who wait. Now most folks look at the desert and see nothing but death and dust. But the tribes of the Southwest knew better. They saw life hiding in the strangest of places, like the spiky, sword-leafed plant called banana yucca. From a distance, banana yucca looks more like a plant you'd avoid than one you'd eat. Long, sharp leaves jut out like a porcupine, guarding its secrets. But come the right season, and up shoots a tall stalk, heavy with green pods hanging like bananas in the sun. That's where the treasure hides. Now don't go thinking you can just pick one and bite into it. Raw banana yucca fruit is tough, fibrous, and about as pleasant as chewing leather straps. But the tribes knew the trick. Roast it over a fire, or boil it in water, and magic happens. The flesh softens, turns sweet, almost jam-like, with a taste somewhere between baked fruit leather and caramelized squash. This wasn't just survival food. Flowers, edible when roasted, almost like a vegetable side dish. Roots, mashed into natural soap for washing. Leaves, stripped into fibers strong enough for baskets, rope, even sandals. One plant, countless uses. That's how you survived in a land that gave nothing for free. And let's not forget, banana yucca is tough as the desert itself. No rain for months. It doesn't care. Soil dry and rocky. It thrives. These plants still scatter across Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Modern chefs and adventurous foragers are just now catching on, turning roasted banana yucca into unique jams and Southwestern-inspired desserts. But don't expect to see it at your grocery store. The fruit is still best gathered straight from the wild, where it's been waiting for centuries. Banana yucca reminds us that even in the harshest land, sweetness finds a way, if you know how to unlock it. Now, most folks think of plums as grocery store fruit. Big, juicy, purple things you find in baskets. But long before supermarkets, there was a wild cousin clinging to America's sandy shores. The beach plum. Imagine it, partner. Scrappy little bushes growing right out of the dunes, battered by salt spray and coastal winds that never quit. Where most plants would wither and die, beach plums thrive on adversity. From Maine down to Virginia, they're nature's stubborn survivors. Native tribes knew the value of these tart little gems. They gathered them by the handful, cooking them down into sauces to brighten up bland meals, preserves that lasted through brutal winters, even dyes for clothing and crafts. That deep purple stain of the coast. Here's the kicker. Beach plums don't want pampering. They grow best when punished. Pure sand, stronger harvest, wind howling off the ocean, even better. They're the tough kids of the fruit world, thriving exactly where nothing else dares grow. And here's what's beautiful. This tradition never quite died. Even today, small coastal towns hold beach plum festivals where locals gather the wild fruit and cook jelly the old-fashioned way. They pass down secrets, how to spot the best bushes, when to harvest, and how to make jelly that sets just right. Packed with antioxidants and vitamin A, these wild fruits didn't just taste good. They kept bodies strong, especially in lean times when scurvy was always lurking. Now here's a fruit that'll fool you. Despite the name, Oregon grape ain't no grape at all, not even close. Instead, it grows in tight clusters of sharp blue-purple berries on spiky evergreen shrubs that look more like holly than any vineyard vine. The indigenous tribes of the Northwest knew better than to judge by appearances. They'd been using Oregon grape for centuries, not just for food, but for medicine. See, those sour little berries carried more than a punch of vitamin C. They held something modern science calls berberine, a compound mighty useful for gut health and infections. Long before labs and pills, native peoples were making tonics and teas that healed stomach troubles and gave strength through long, damp winters. Taste one raw, and you'll pucker up faster than if you bit into the sourest lemon. Your whole face scrunches, your tongue protests, and you wonder why anyone would bother. But cook 'em down, add a little honey, maybe mixed with sweeter berries, and suddenly, magic. The harsh bite mellows into a deep, wine-like tartness, rich and complex. Perfect for jams, syrups, and refreshing drinks. The Oregon grape is proof that nature doesn't hand out sweetness for free. Sometimes, partner, you gotta take a little bitterness before you find the cure. Now, most fruits hang high in trees, waiting for you to climb or reach. But mayhaw berries, they do things their own way. When they ripen each spring, they drop right into the swamp water and float, like little crimson lifeboats bobbing along in the floodwaters. That's how they got their name. May for the month they ripen, and haw from the hawthorns they're kin to. For tribes and early settlers across Louisiana, East Texas, and Arkansas, mayhaws weren't just food. They were a signal of the season, a gift floating right to your hands if you were willing to paddle out and scoop them up. The taste? Imagine a tart apple mixed with a cranberry, but with a sweeter finish that lingers on the tongue. Indigenous groups mashed them into preserves that lasted months, their natural acids working as built-in preservatives. Settlers followed suit, learning to boil the fruit down into a jelly so unique it's still prized today. And here's the kicker. These little swamp fruits carried more vitamin C than most citrus. In a world where scurvy and sickness weren't strangers, mayhaws were medicine as much as food. Today, mayhaw jelly remains a secret treasure of the South. You'll still find it at small-town festivals and farmers' markets, sold by folks whose grandparents passed down the recipe. Pink-red in color, tangy-sweet in flavor, it's a taste of heritage in every spoonful. Now some fruits shout their presence loud and proud. Bright colors, dangling branches, easy to spot, but not the ground cherry. This little golden gem plays it sneaky, wrapping itself up in a papery husk that looks like a tiny lantern swaying in the breeze. For centuries, native tribes knew the secret. They'd peel back that husk and find a fruit that tasted like nothing else in the wild. Bite into one, and it's like pineapple, crashed into vanilla custard with a whisper of mango. Sweet, tropical, surprising, yet growing quietly in the heart of America. And that husk wasn't just for show. It acted like nature's packaging, protecting the fruit from bugs, rot, and weather, giving it a shelf life way longer than most wild berries. For people living without refrigeration, that little husk was a miracle. Ground cherries were the kind of crop you barely had to tend. Plant one, and they'd reseed themselves year after year, spreading across gardens and wild patches like they owned the place. Minimal work, maximum reward. That made them a frontier favorite, a sweet treat that practically grew itself. Packed with vitamins A and C, plus antioxidants, ground cherries weren't just tasty. They kept bodies strong through hard times. Native cooks baked them into breads, tossed them into stews, and dried them into chewy sweets for the winter. Even today, gardeners and homesteaders are rediscovering what the old-timers knew. Ground cherries make jams that taste like nothing else. Less sugar needed. Tropical flavor built right in. They're also hardy, spreading in backyard gardens without fuss, producing dozens of fruits per plant. Ground cherries prove that sometimes the best treasures don't sit high in trees or shine bright from afar. Sometimes they hide low to the ground, waiting for sharp eyes and patient hands. Now most folks know plums as big, juicy fruits stacked in baskets at the store. But out on the frontier, there was a smaller, wilder cousin, the American plum. These little trees didn't grow in neat rows. They huddled together in dense thickets, thorny and wild, forming natural fences along forest edges, creek banks, and abandoned fields. To most travelers, they looked like scrub brush. But native tribes knew better. They returned year after year, timing their harvest for when the fruits, no bigger than a large cherry, turned a deep reddish purple. Small, yes, but bite into one, and you'd get a rush of flavor far more intense than any store-bought plum. Tartness came first, sharp enough to make your eyes water. But then came the sweetness, a balance that made these plums perfect for drying into strips, pounding into pemmican, or storing in bark containers for winter. Each bite was a burst of vitamins, especially vitamin C and antioxidants, just when people needed them most. But here's the real beauty, partner. American plum thickets weren't just food for people. They were ecosystems of their own. One patch of plums could feed an entire woodland community. And these plums had grit. They didn't wither after hardship. They thrived on it. Fires swept through. They'd send up new shoots. Floods rolled in. They'd bounce back. Even construction or grazing couldn't kill them. Their roots would push up new life, forming thicker thickets than before. Modern foragers and homesteaders are finally starting to see what the old tribes knew. Wild American plums make jams and jellies so flavorful that a little fruit goes a long way. Some folks are even transplanting shoots to create living fences of fruit, orchards that grow and defend themselves without human pampering. These wild plums remind us of something simple yet powerful. The strongest things aren't always the biggest. Sometimes they're the stubborn little fruits that refuse to quit, no matter how rough the land gets. The American plum was never about abundance. It was about resilience. And partner, that's the true heart of frontier living.